I was once told my routine limited my potential. Instead of defending it, I rebuilt my priorities around growth and long-term vision. Months later, the consistency that was questioned became the same quality that earned recognition and respect. You're wasting your life following the same boring schedule every single day. Those words hit me harder than any breakup line I'd ever heard. I stood there in my apartment, gym bag still in hand, staring at the woman I'd been dating for almost 2 years. She wasn't joking. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. I'm 29, work in software development, and yeah, I keep a pretty structured schedule. Wake up at 5:30, gym by 6, work by 8:30, meal prep on Sundays, read for an hour before bed. Nothing crazy. Nothing I thought was worth ending a relationship over. You don't get it, she continued, tossing her hair back in that way she did when she was building up to something big. Every weekend I suggest something spontaneous. You check your calendar first. Every time I want to stay up late and just talk, you're worried about your sleep schedule. You're 29, not 65. I set my gym bag down slowly. My routine helps me stay focused on my goals. What goals? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You've been at the same company for 4 years. Same position, same salary. Your precious routine isn't getting you anywhere. It's just keeping you comfortable. That one stung because part of me wondered if she was right. I hadn't been promoted. I'd turned down opportunities to lead projects because they would have required unpredictable hours. I'd skipped networking events because they interfered with my workout schedule. Maybe I like being comfortable, I said, but even I could hear how weak it sounded. She grabbed her jacket from the back of my couch. That's the problem. You're so comfortable you've stopped growing. I can't watch you waste your potential anymore. So that's it. You're breaking up with me because I go to the gym regularly? I'm breaking up with you because you're choosing routine over growth. Over us. Over everything. She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the knob. One day you'll realize life is happening while you're scheduling it. Then she was gone. I stood there for a long time, gym bag at my feet, wondering if she was right. Wondering if my structured life had become a cage instead of a framework. That night, I couldn't sleep despite my carefully maintained sleep schedule. I kept thinking about her words. Wasting my potential. Same position. Same salary. Choosing routine over growth. By 3 in the morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a notebook. Not to abandon my routine, but to examine whether it was actually serving my goals or just making me feel productive. The truth was uncomfortable. My routine had become an end in itself rather than a means to something greater. I went to the gym religiously, but had stopped pushing my limits months ago. I read every night, but realized I'd been rereading the same types of books, never challenging myself with new ideas. I meal prepped efficiently, but had stopped experimenting with nutrition that could actually optimize my performance. My routine had become comfortable, safe, predictable, and maybe that was the problem. The next morning, I showed up at work and really looked around for the first time in months. My desk was in the same spot, same monitor setup, same coffee mug, same conversations with the same people about the same projects. I'd been coasting. My manager, Trevor, called me into his office around 10. Got a minute? I followed him in, expecting another routine check-in. We've got a new project, he said, leaning back in his chair. Client's a startup in the fintech space. They need a complete platform rebuild. Aggressive timeline. High visibility. It's going to require some serious hours and probably weekend work for the next few months. I opened my mouth to decline, the way I always did. Then I stopped. Tell me more, I said instead. Trevor looked surprised. Really? You're usually pretty protective of your schedule. I'm reconsidering my priorities. He studied me for a moment. Okay, well, it's a 3-person team. You'd be working with Marcus from the senior dev team and Olivia, who just transferred from our New York office. Marcus would technically be lead, but there's a lot of room to step up and show what you can do. I'm in. You sure? It's going to be intense. Late nights. Probably some all-nighters near deadlines. Weekend work sessions. The kind of thing that doesn't fit neatly into a 9-to-5 schedule. I'm sure. Trevor nodded slowly. All right then. Meetings tomorrow at 9. Come prepared with ideas. This client is paying a premium and expects innovation, not just solid execution. That evening, I skipped the gym. Instead, I spent 4 hours researching fintech platforms, studying competitor products, and sketching out architecture ideas. It felt chaotic, uncomfortable. My normal routine was completely disrupted. And for the first time in months, I felt genuinely excited about work. The next morning, I showed up to the meeting with a notebook full of ideas. Marcus was already there, mid-30s with the casual confidence of someone who'd been a senior developer for years. Olivia arrived a few minutes later. She was probably around my age, dressed professionally but with an edge that suggested she didn't follow conventional paths. "So you're the routine guy," she said, sitting down across from me. I blinked. "Excuse me. Trevor mentioned you're known for keeping a tight schedule. Usually turn down the intense projects." "That's changing." She raised an eyebrow. "We'll see." The meeting started, and Trevor outlined the project scope. The client wanted a complete rebuild of their payment processing platform. 6-month timeline. Multiple integration points. High security requirements. Marcus immediately started talking about standard approaches, proven frameworks, safe choices. I waited until he finished. "What if we don't go standard?" I said. Everyone looked at me. "The client's a startup trying to disrupt the space," I continued. "If we give them a standard platform, they'll have a standard product. What if we incorporate some newer architecture patterns? Microservices with event-driven design. It's riskier, but it would give them actual competitive advantage." Marcus frowned. "That's a lot more complex. Higher chance of problems. Higher ceiling too." Olivia leaned forward. "I'm listening. What else?" I flipped open my notebook and started explaining the research I'd done. By the end of the meeting, Trevor looked impressed. Marcus looked annoyed. Olivia looked interested. "All right," Trevor said. "Let's present both approaches to the client next week. Marcus, you'll present the standard approach. You two work together on the innovative option. Client decides." Over the next week, Olivia and I basically lived at the office. My gym schedule went out the window. My meal prep got replaced with takeout and late-night pizza. My reading time got repurposed for learning new frameworks and design patterns. But something was different this time. I wasn't just abandoning my routine. I was rebuilding it around actual growth. I started waking up at 5, not to hit the gym, but to study and code while my mind was fresh. I blocked out time for deep work instead of just showing up for meetings. I tracked my learning, setting specific goals for what new skills I wanted to develop each week. It looked chaotic from the outside, but it was actually more intentional than my old routine ever was. "You're really going all in on this," Olivia said one night around 11 as we were testing integration points. "Making up for lost time." "What do you mean?" I told her about the breakup, about spending years maintaining a routine that kept me comfortable but stagnant. She told me I was wasting my potential, I said. And she was right. I was choosing comfort over growth, calling it discipline when it was really just fear of uncertainty. Olivia nodded slowly. "I get that. I used to be the opposite. Completely chaotic. Changed jobs every year. Moved cities on a whim. Thought structure was for boring people. What changed? I realized chaos wasn't freedom. It was just another way to avoid committing to anything difficult. Real growth requires both structure and flexibility, discipline and adaptability. That's exactly what I'm trying to figure out." She smiled. "Well, this project is a good test. Structured enough to have deadlines and requirements. Chaotic enough to require constant problem solving and adaptation." The client meeting came faster than I expected. Marcus presented first. His approach was solid. Safe. Everything would work exactly as expected, with minimal risk. Then Olivia and I presented. I'd spent the entire morning rehearsing, making sure I could explain complex technical decisions in terms of business value. The client was 3 people. The CEO, a guy named David in his early 30s, the CTO, a woman named Vanessa who'd founded 2 previous startups, and their lead investor, an older man named Richard who mostly watched and listened. "What you're describing sounds ambitious," David said when we finished. "Maybe too ambitious." "It is ambitious," I agreed. "But you're trying to disrupt an established market. A safe, standard platform won't give you the competitive edge you need. This approach will." "And if it fails?" Richard asked. His first words of the meeting. "Then we fail while aiming high instead of succeeding at being mediocre," I said. "But we've built in safeguards. Modular design means if one component struggles, it doesn't bring down the whole system. We can iterate and adjust without starting over." Vanessa leaned forward. "Walk me through the technical risk mitigation." For the next 20 minutes, she grilled me on every technical decision. Not hostile, just thorough. She wanted to know I'd actually thought this through and wasn't just selling her on buzzwords. I answered every question, not because I'd memorized talking points, but because I'd spent the last week genuinely understanding these systems inside and out. The old me would have prepared a safe presentation and hoped not to get too many hard questions. The new me had dove deep enough to defend every choice. All right, David said finally. We're going with your approach. But understand, this means you're accountable for the results. No hiding behind, we tried something innovative. It either works or it doesn't. Understood. After they left, Trevor pulled me aside. That was impressive. I've never seen you present like that. I've never had something worth presenting like that. Marcus didn't congratulate me. He spent the rest of the day making it clear he thought we'd just talked the client into a disaster we'd all be blamed for. I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt like I was actually building something that mattered. The next 3 months were brutal. I worked longer hours than I ever had. My apartment became basically a place to shower and occasionally sleep. But I was learning more every single day than I'd learned in the previous 2 years combined. The old routine had been about maintenance. This new approach was about constant improvement. I still structured my time. Actually, more carefully than before. But now it was structured around high-impact activities, not just comfortable habits. I blocked out morning hours for complex problem-solving when my mind was sharpest. I scheduled learning time to stay ahead of the technologies we were implementing. I made time for exercise, but repurposed it as thinking time, using walks to work through architectural problems. Even my diet changed. Not because I was meal prepping, but because I started paying attention to what actually fueled my performance versus what just filled my stomach. You know, Olivia said one Saturday afternoon as we were debugging an authentication issue, when Trevor first told me about you, I figured you'd flake after the first few weeks. What changed your mind? You haven't flaked. And more than that, you're getting better. Fast. Most people plateau because they stop learning once they're comfortable. You're doing the opposite. I wasted a lot of time being comfortable. You're making up for it. Around month 4, we hit our first major crisis. A critical integration was failing in ways we hadn't anticipated. The client was getting nervous. Marcus started pushing to fall back to his original, safer approach. We need to cut our losses, he said in a tense meeting. This innovative approach is collapsing. We should have gone with the proven solution from the start. It's not collapsing, I said. It's hitting a predictable challenge that happens with complex systems. We knew this kind of thing could happen. That's why we built in the modular structure. So what's your solution? Trevor asked. I'd spent the last 3 days barely sleeping, working through the problem. The integration is failing because we're treating it like a traditional API call. We need to restructure it as an event-driven system. It's more work, but it solves the underlying issue and actually makes the platform more resilient. How long? David asked. He'd started sitting in on our weekly meetings after the crisis emerged. 2 weeks. Maybe 3. We don't have 3 weeks, Marcus said. The timeline is already tight. Then we'll work faster, I said. But falling back to the safe approach now means starting over. That's months, not weeks. This is our best path forward. David looked at Vanessa. She studied me carefully. You confident you can solve this? Yes. Then you've got 2 weeks. But I'm not giving you 3. For the next 14 days, Olivia and I practically lived at the office. We brought in sleeping bags, kept changes of clothes in our desks, showered at the office gym. It was beyond intense, but it was also exactly what I needed. Not the suffering for suffering's sake, but the experience of pushing through a genuinely hard problem, committing fully, and seeing whether I could actually deliver. The old me would have avoided this situation entirely, would have chosen the safe path from the beginning, never taking on the risk. But risk avoidance isn't the same as discipline. Sometimes discipline means taking on the hard thing and seeing it through. On day 13, at around 2 in the morning, Olivia shouted from her desk. I think I got it. I ran over. She'd found the exact configuration that made the event-driven approach work. We spent the next 6 hours testing, breaking things, fixing them, testing again. By 8 in the morning, we had a working solution. By noon, it was deployed to the development environment. By 5, we were presenting it to David and Vanessa. Show me it works, Vanessa said. We ran through a dozen test scenarios. The system handled everything. Not just handled it, performed better than the original specification required. David smiled for the first time in weeks. This is exactly what we needed. Better than what we asked for. After they left, I sat at my desk, completely exhausted. Trevor came over. Go home. Sleep for a day. You've earned it. I did go home, but I couldn't sleep at first. My mind was still racing. Not with stress. With the realization that I'd just done something I'd never done before. I'd bet on myself, taken on a genuinely hard challenge, and delivered. The old routine had protected me from failure, but it had also protected me from real success. The next day, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went to my old gym, the one I'd gone to religiously for years as part of my unbreakable routine, and I realized I didn't miss it. Not because exercise wasn't important, but because I'd found better ways to stay active that integrated with my actual goals instead of existing as separate checkboxes. I walked around my old neighborhood, seeing the coffee shop where I'd spent countless Sunday mornings meal prepping, the bookstore where I'd bought the same types of self-help books over and over, the whole ecosystem of my comfortable routine. It felt like looking at someone else's life. Then I saw her, my ex. She was coming out of that same coffee shop, laughing with someone. A guy. He looked like the opposite of me. Messy hair, vintage band t-shirt. The kind of spontaneous, free-spirited person she'd always wanted me to be. She saw me and stopped. The laughter died. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then she walked over, leaving the guy waiting at a respectful distance. "Hey," she said. "Hey, you look different." "I am different." She studied me. "You're not at the gym. It's Saturday morning. You're always at the gym Saturday morning." "Not anymore." Something flickered across her face. "So you finally decided to loosen up? Become more spontaneous?" "No. I decided to rebuild my routine around growth instead of comfort." "Big difference." "What does that mean?" I told her about the project, about the last few months, about learning the difference between discipline that serves you and routine that cages you. "So you're still following a schedule," she said. "Just a different one. I'm following structure that's designed to push me forward instead of keep me comfortable. You were right that I was wasting my potential, but you were wrong about the solution." "What do you mean?" "You thought the problem was the routine itself. That structure was holding me back. But the problem was that my routine had become an end instead of a means. I needed better structure, not less structure." She didn't say anything for a moment. "That guy," she gestured toward the coffee shop, "he's exactly what I thought I wanted. Spontaneous, unpredictable, no schedules or plans. And it's exhausting. We never accomplish anything. He's got all these ideas, but no follow-through. I thought structure was boring, but chaos is just empty. So what are you saying?" She looked at me carefully. "I'm saying maybe I was wrong. About what you needed. About what I needed. Maybe you were. Is there any chance we could?" She trailed off. I thought about it. Really thought about it. 6 months ago, I would have jumped at the chance. Would have been grateful she was giving me another shot. But I wasn't the same person anymore. "I don't think so," I said finally. She looked hurt. "Why not?" "Because you're still looking for the easy answer. You thought my routine was the problem, so you left. Now you're with someone chaotic and realizing that's not the answer either. But you haven't figured out what you actually want. You're just reacting. And you have it all figured out?" "No. But I'm building towards something instead of just avoiding discomfort. That's the difference." She stood there for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I hope it works out for you." "You too." She walked back to the guy waiting at the coffee shop. I watched them leave, and I didn't feel sad. I felt clear, like I'd finally figured out what I'd been trying to learn. Back at work the following Monday, Trevor called me into his office. Closed the door. I sat down, suddenly nervous. "The client is thrilled," he said. "More than thrilled. They're telling everyone in their network about the platform. We're getting referrals based on this project." "That's great." "It is. And because of that, we're expanding the team. We need someone to lead the new Advanced Solutions group. Projects like the one you just finished. High risk, high reward client work." I waited. "I'm offering you the position. It comes with a significant raise, equity options, and a lot of responsibility. But based on what you've shown over the last few months, I think you're ready." 6 months ago, I would have hesitated. Would have worried about the unpredictable hours, the loss of comfortable routine, the risk of failure. "When do I start?" Trevor smiled. "Next month. Finish up the current project documentation first. But start thinking about who you want on your team." "I want Olivia." "Already assumed." "Anyone else?" "Give me a few days to think about it." That night, Olivia and I went out to celebrate. Not to some wild party or club, just to a quiet restaurant where we could actually talk. "Team lead," she said, raising her glass. Not bad for someone who was supposedly too routine-focused. "I'm not sure I ever would have gotten here without that breakup." "You think she did you a favor?" "In a way. She was right that my routine had become a cage. But her solution was to abandon structure entirely. Took me a while to figure out the real answer was better structure, not less structure." Olivia nodded. "Most people never figure that out. They either become rigidly routine-bound or completely chaotic. The sweet spot is having strong structure that's designed for growth." "Is that what you do?" "I try to. Some days are more structured, some less. but it's all in service of actually building something meaningful, not just filling time. That's exactly what I'm trying to build into this new role. We talked for hours about what the team could become. Not just another department, but a place where structure and innovation coexisted. Where people could be disciplined without being rigid. Where growth was the goal, not comfort. Over the next month, I finished documenting the project and started assembling my team. I looked for people who understood that balance. Not the most chaotic innovators or the most rigid specialists, but people who could commit deeply to structure while remaining adaptable. Marcus declined my offer to join. "You're taking on too much risk," he said. "I prefer stable projects." Fair enough. I wasn't offended. He'd figured out what worked for him, and it wasn't this. But several other developers jumped at the chance. People who'd been coasting in comfortable positions, looking for something that would push them. My first day as team lead, I stood in front of the group. "We're not going to be the department that plays it safe," I said. "But we're also not going to be chaotic cowboys who break things for the sake of innovation. We're going to be disciplined about taking smart risks, structured about pursuing growth, clear about the difference between comfort and excellence." One of the newer team members raised her hand. "How do we know the difference?" Good question. Comfort is when your routine exists to protect you from uncertainty. Excellence is when your structure exists to help you pursue hard goals. One is defensive. One is offensive. We're going to be offensive. The first few months were challenging. Learning to lead was different from learning to code. I had to think about team dynamics, communication, project management, all the soft skills I'd neglected while focusing on technical excellence. But I approached it the same way I'd approached the platform rebuild, with structure designed for growth. I blocked out time for one-on-ones with each team member, created systems for knowledge sharing and mentorship, built feedback loops that helped us learn from both successes and failures. And I made sure to keep pushing myself technically, because the moment I stopped growing was the moment I'd start just maintaining. 6 months into the new role, the company held its annual awards ceremony. I wasn't expecting anything. I was too focused on the work to pay attention to recognition. But Trevor pulled me aside before it started. "They're giving you the Innovation Award," he said, "for what you've built with the Advanced Solutions team. The client satisfaction scores are through the roof, and the revenue from that division is already exceeding projections." I had a great team. You build a great team. There's a difference. When they called my name, I walked up to accept the award, looked out at the company, saw Olivia and the rest of my team cheering, saw Marcus sitting quietly, probably still thinking we were all taking too much risk, saw Trevor smiling like he knew this was coming all along. In my acceptance speech, I kept it brief. A year ago, someone told me my routine was limiting my potential. She was right, but the solution wasn't to abandon structure. It was to rebuild my priorities around growth instead of comfort. Everything that's happened since then came from understanding that difference. "Thank you." Short applause, and I sat back down. After the ceremony, several people came up to congratulate me. Some asked about joining my team. Others wanted advice on their own careers. I tried to help where I could, but I also knew everyone's path was different. What worked for me? The realization that I needed better structure, not less, might not be the answer for someone else. That evening, I went home to my apartment. The same place where, a year ago, I'd stood with a gym bag in my hand being told I was wasting my life. I looked around. It was still organized. I still kept a schedule. I still meal prepped on Sundays, went to bed at a reasonable hour, made time for exercise and reading. But everything was different. The schedule wasn't designed to keep me comfortable. It was designed to keep me growing. The meal prep wasn't about convenience. It was about fueling performance. The exercise wasn't about checking a box. It was about maintaining the physical and mental capacity for hard work. Every element of my routine served a purpose beyond itself. I pulled out my phone and looked at my schedule for the next week. Monday through Friday were packed with team meetings, client calls, strategic planning sessions. Saturday morning was blocked for a learning sprint on emerging technologies. Sunday afternoon was marked as unscheduled thinking time. It looked chaotic to someone who valued spontaneity. It looked rigid to someone who feared commitment. But to me, it looked like exactly what I needed. Structure in service of growth. Consistency in pursuit of excellence. Routine as a tool, not a cage. I thought about texting my ex, telling her how things turned out. But I didn't. She didn't need to know. This wasn't about proving her wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could build something meaningful. That I could take the criticism, examine it honestly, and use it as fuel for actual change. Not reactive change. Intentional transformation. The next morning, I woke up at 5:30. Not because I'd always done it, but because I'd chosen to do it for reasons that served my long-term vision. I spent an hour reviewing my team's current projects, identifying bottlenecks and opportunities. Hit the gym at 7 for a focused workout that cleared my mind for the day ahead. At work by 8:30, ready for a full day of building something that mattered. Olivia stopped by my office mid-morning. Got a minute? Always. She sat down. I wanted to thank you for pulling me onto this team, for creating an environment where structure and creativity can coexist. I've learned more in the last year than I did in the previous 3 combined. You've taught me just as much. Maybe, but you created the space for it. That's leadership. After she left, I sat back in my chair and thought about the journey. From comfortable routine to breakup to crisis to breakthrough. From maintenance to growth. From defending my schedule to rebuilding my priorities. The consistency that was once questioned had become the foundation of everything I'd built. Not because I'd refused to change, but because I'd changed in the right direction. I'd learned to be consistent about the things that mattered, flexible about the things that didn't, and ruthlessly honest about the difference. My phone buzzed with a text from Trevor. New client meeting next week. Bigger than anything we've done before. You interested? I smiled and typed back. Absolutely. Because that was the thing about real growth. It never stopped. The routine wasn't the destination. It was the vehicle, and I was finally going somewhere that mattered. I looked out my office window at the city below. People rushing to meetings, chasing deadlines, building their own versions of success. Each one following their own routines, their own structures, their own paths. Some of them growing, some of them stagnating. The difference wasn't whether they had routines. It was whether those routines served growth or prevented it. And I'd finally figured out which side I was on. My calendar pinged with a reminder. Time for my afternoon deep work session. I closed my door, put my phone on silent, and dove into the technical challenge I'd been wrestling with all week. This was the routine now. Not rigid, not comfortable, but intentionally structured around becoming the person I wanted to be. Around building the team I wanted to lead. Around creating the impact I wanted to have. The consistency that was once criticized had become my greatest strength. Not because I defended it unchanged, but because I'd rebuilt it around a vision that actually mattered. And in the end, that made all the difference.